Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the American Culture webinar. Very delighted to be here. My name is Melissa Schumi Jones, and I'm one of the Cultural Affairs Officers at the U.S. Embassy in Lima, Peru. And today we have a special guest actually right here with us doing the webinar today. We have our English language fellow, Ryan Brux from Tarapoto, Peru, and so he'll be joining us shortly. So just a reminder that the purpose of these American Culture webinars is for us to share some information about U.S. culture and then to help you create a plan or give you some ideas for how you can use this information directly in your classroom. So please do ask us questions. That's why we're here. We're really excited to share this information with you. You can write your questions in the chat pod you have there, and we'll try to answer as many as we can as we go along. We've got a lot to talk about today. So here's the question, what are we going to discuss today? I think that picture can give you a good idea, that painting. We're going to talk about exploring frontiers. This is a concept that really hits at the core of the American identity. It's also a really fun way to talk about science and technology and how we understand the world around us. The painting that we're looking at here in this slide shows a picture of the American explorers Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. These two men embarked on an expedition that started in 1804 from the city of St. Louis, which is on the Mississippi River in the middle of the United States, in the middle of what is now the United States, and they crossed the continent all the way over to the Pacific Ocean. It was the first such expedition that went all the way across the western portion of the territory that eventually became the United States. And the goal was to explore and to map this newly acquired territory. President at that time was Thomas Jefferson, and he commissioned the expedition shortly after the Louisiana Purchase, which was when a huge swath of land that comprises the middle of the United States was purchased and became part of the United States. So this expedition was the first, there it goes automatically, there we go, sorry about that. So this expedition was the first phase of this frontier legacy that we're going to be discussing within the United States. And since its very beginning, exploration has been really about science and technology as well as economic objectives. So what are our goals today, or what are the goals for talking about frontiers and this exploration in your classroom? Well, we want to teach students about this American legacy of frontiers and all of that, what that entails, because that's a fun topic and it's talking about a different side of American history. But also we want to expand the definition of frontiers, and today we're going to expand that definition to include the frontiers of exploration that are oceans and outer space. But there can be a lot of other ones that maybe you'll be thinking of too. And also we're going to discuss how human beings, using their own motivation and education and preparation, work together with technology to explore new frontiers. And part of that interaction, we also want to discuss how exploration and conservation have to work together in our modern world. And also, of course, this is about English language learning. So we want to remind you to touch on with your students the idea that language as a tool helps fuel exploration and can also help with conservation. But like I said, today we're not just going to talk about the history of the 1800s in the United States on the frontiers in the western part of the United States. We're also going to talk about how exploration is alive and well in the United States. And two exciting areas to talk about there are oceans and our waterways and all of that, and the exploration of outer space. But first, let's talk about this legacy. Let's talk some history. So when we talk about the American frontier, there's a lot of themes that are incorporated in there. There's the geography, the history, the folklore involved, and the cultural expressions of life that were going on that were part of this wave of expansion moving westward. This wave started off from the English colonial settlements in the 17th century and ended when the last of these territories of the mainland were converted into states in the early 20th century. So remember, when the United States was first formed, and this is something that we talked about quite a bit in our last webinar last month, the original colonies were all along the east coast, or the side of the country where the Atlantic Ocean lies. So now, as you know from modern maps, The United States stretches all the way across the North American continent from the Atlantic Ocean on the east side to the Pacific Ocean on the west. This is another painting here, similar to the first, representing the expedition of Lewis and Clark. You know what? In reality, I could spend an entire webinar just talking about this painting because there's so many different elements going on here. You don't have just a picture of the two explorers in this. You can see them in the middle, see Lewis and Clark, but you also have Sacagawea shown in this painting. Sacagawea was a member of the Shoshone American Indian tribe who traveled with Lewis and Clark, acting as an interpreter and guide, particularly during the time when they were interacting with the Shoshone people in the middle of the United States. And on the other side, on the left side of the picture, you also see a young African-American man named York, who was the slave of William Clark. There are so many themes there within Frontiers, especially how this expansion, how settlers came into contact with Native American tribes, also how slavery affected the incorporation of new territories into the country, into the United States as states. But unfortunately today, with our limited time, we're actually going to look at exploration from a scientific perspective, or this angle right here, more than from a sociological or an ethnographic perspective. So just so you know that there are lots of other elements in this topic that we could be discussing too. So in the second half of the 19th century, which means like 1850 to 1900, there was a lot of expansion going on in the United States. There was a lot of expansion as Americans set off to the west looking for their fortunes, looking to ply their fortunes in land, like through farming or in trade or in the search for gold. And the federal government of the United States definitely fueled this expansion, not just leadership from the president saying, commissioning expeditions like Thomas Jefferson did with Lewis and Clark, but also they were creating treaties with foreign nations, with native tribes, or treaties or political compromises. And on the other side, they were also fighting military battles that resulted in some of this expansion. So there were generations of Americans that were involved in this exploration, and these groups of people got together. They built towns, they had their ranches and farms, and they were digging in the mines across the western part of the states. And this is how the United States expanded from coast to coast and fulfilled the dreams of manifest destiny. That's a really important phrase I want you to take note of. Manifest destiny. This is a widely held belief, or manifest destiny can be described as a widely held belief that Americans were supposed to expand, not just stay in their colonies along the East Coast, along the Atlantic Ocean, but they were supposed to expand and fill up the continent, sharing American institutions, establishing American-style towns and communities across the country. Now, not everybody believed in this, not everybody held this belief, but it was generally a belief or an ethos that the country used to rationalize what it was doing in terms of this expansion. Also, the use of the word destiny is very important because destiny implies that there's some higher power, or that God wanted the American people to expand across the continent from sea to shining sea. You can see on the slide there is a painting by John Gass that was done in about 1872, and the painting is called American Progress. And it shows sort of a representation, if you look closely, a representation of the modernization of the New West. And here there's this woman, who's this figure that's depicted in the slide is described as a personification of the United States. And in her hands, you can see she's pulling along the lines of a telegraph. Telegraph was the lines of communication before there was telephones and before there was internet and all these wonderful tools that we have to communicate. So she has telegraph wire in her hand that she's stringing along, and she also has a school book. You can also see different types of economic activities going on, and you can see different forms of transportation. They have horses and carriages stagecoaches and covered wagons. So I think this slide, or this picture there on the left, really represents manifest destiny, this concept that I was just speaking about. And the reason I even bring up manifest destiny is because it's still something that exists in the American mindset, or in the political discourse that we have about what is America's responsibility, not just in its territory. We don't really have any territory to expand into, but there is a sense, part of the American identity, that it's our responsibility to share our institutions or our belief systems with the world. And so that's something that continues to be debated to this day and discussed as people talk about what it means to be an American or an American institution. So I wanted to ask here, this is a moment I wanted to pause and ask if there are anyone who can tell me what they think of when I say the word frontiers, or when I say the words American West, when I talk about the Old West. Can anybody write in and tell me what images come to mind when you hear those terms, or what images might come to your students' minds during that time? Of course, you might get some ideas from the slide that's there too, but I just want to ask if there's anything that comes to mind. Anyone have any ideas? The picture on the right, I'm just going to keep going here while you guys pop in and tell me if you have any ideas. The image on the right is interesting too. This is a picture of individuals who are part of the gold rush. And the reason I selected this particular image is because there is a woman in this picture. There wasn't a lot of pictures of women participating in the gold rush, but I thought this one was kind of interesting because the work of panning for gold, which was done in California and was a big part of this expansion, was primarily done by men. But in this picture, you have a woman participating. Yes, exactly. This Marcella is saying, talking about the gold rush. So she understood what was going on in this photo at the right here. The gold rush is a very iconic part of the frontier because a lot of people came from very specific purposes to the western part of the United States, particularly California, to search for gold. Everyone knows gold is supposed to bring you lots of money. So there was a lot of people that traveled from their homes to start a new life. Anybody else have any images that come to mind when I say the West or the frontier? Well, I definitely think of the image of a pioneer. I really like this picture of a covered wagon here that you can see in the painting of American Progress here. This idea of a family going in their carriage. Part of that is because when I was growing up and I was in elementary school, we had a game called the Oregon Trail that we played on the computer, and the game was basically you created a family and you had to travel to you had a certain amount of money and you got to buy your supplies, and then you would go traveling across the Oregon Trail in your covered wagon. And this was one of the first video games or computer games that I ever played, and we played it all the time at school. And you had different challenges. Sometimes you would get sick, there would be a famine, or sometimes you would have one of your family members would get sick, and then you would lose points and that side of things. So that's what I think of. Somebody else was talking about just the image of these wide open lands, or this expansive space of territory as people were moving westward. Or also what we talked about before about all the Native American communities, that these lands were not unoccupied. There were cultures that had been living there for hundreds and thousands of years as well. And again, I wish we could talk about all those topics, but there's just so much to keep going to. The other image that I thought maybe would come up here, that might come up for some of your students, is the image of a cowboy. When you think of the Old West, I particularly didn't say the words the Wild West, because I didn't want to tip anybody off to the image of a cowboy. But that's another sense, another part of this frontier legacy is a lot of the people that left and were settlers in the West would be young men that would go and leave their families, or before they started families, were going off to look for fortune. So this concept or image of the American cowboy is developing during this time. Now, all of these, the idea of the cowboy or the settler, the pioneer, is a true thing, are true parts of the American culture, but they've also been romanticized. They've been romanticized in TV or film from Hollywood and that sort of thing. So it's very interesting that not only is this a real part of our history, but it's also become bigger and even more pervasive as part of our cultural identity through media or through narrative stories like in film or books or television. So again, we were talking about this. What are today's frontiers? This is sort of just talking about why we're doing this webinar, or why we're talking about frontiers in this way. I like to think of frontiers as something that's always evolving. Frontiers don't just mean territory. It's not just about space. It's also about new areas of exploration. And a lot of that exploration that goes on today is based in science and technology. So what I was thinking of, just some of the other topics that we're not going to discuss today, but if you think about like research in medicine, research on the cellular research, what happens in between cells or genetics, those kind of things can be considered frontiers in science because they lead to new discoveries all the time about who we are as human beings, how our bodies work, how we deal with disease, or how we become who we are. There's just infinite numbers of frontiers. Even though we're talking about, in a cellular level, we're talking about minuscule things. It's still a frontier. And so we're going to talk about these frontiers of oceans and space. And when we think about them, these are frontiers that not only we need to explore, but we also need to protect. We need to explore them responsibly. And that's where conservation comes in. But let's get started about talking about these. You know, I almost called these modern frontiers, but in reality, if you think about oceans or outer space, these have been frontiers that human beings have been exploring and thinking about exploring since the beginning of human history. So these are not modern frontiers, but they are frontiers that we continue to study. So let's start with oceans. The ocean covers about 71% of the Earth's surface, and it contains 97% of the world's water, of the planet's water. But only a little bit of the oceans have been studied. About 95% of the underwater world remains undiscovered or unexplored. The oceans and lakes of our world, of our country, the United States, and in countries all over the world, play a very important part in the Earth's climate and in weather, and obviously we all need water to live. So World Oceans Day, the reason I brought this slide is that I wanted to tell you a little bit about World Oceans Day, which is something that the United States celebrates in the month of June. It's June 8th every year. This is a really important opportunity during the month of June to focus people's attention on our oceans, on our health of the oceans, and on the inhabitants that live in there. Right there, this slide says that oceans matter, and they do. It's our job to protect and preserve the resources and the life that exists in our oceans. In Peru, here at the embassy, we celebrated World Oceans Day by having a really fun event. We got some kids together in a community a little bit south of Lima, a community called Punta Hermosa, which is right on the beach on the Pacific Ocean. And we had the former world champion from Peru of surfing, Sofia Milonovic, and she came out and talked to the kids about conservation and why it's important to preserve the ocean. And we had an NGO, an organization that works with teaching kids about conservation and specifically about plastics and how plastics that are thrown away instead of recycled can damage the environment, particularly the ocean. You know, a lot of these kids are familiar with seeing bottles or plastic bags on their beach, right in their own community, and to understand what the effect is, what the effect on marine life and on the health of their ocean. That was a really exciting day for us. In the United States, we celebrate June as National Oceans Month. And so I put in a text here, a text from the President Obama's proclamation on National Oceans Month. That's something that the President does, issues proclamations to help people understand why certain dates or certain months are being honored. And I wanted to read to you. This is a difficult text, but I think it could be used for advanced students, and I wanted to share it with you. I'm just going to read the first paragraph so you understand why there is such thing as a National Oceans Month in the United States. From providing food and energy to helping sustain our climate and our security, the oceans play a critical role in nearly every part of our national life. They connect us to countries around the world and support transportation and trade networks that grow our economy. For millions of Americans, our coasts are also a gateway to good jobs and a decent living. All of us have a stake in keeping the oceans, coasts, and Great Lakes clean and productive, which is why we must manage them wisely, not just in our time, but for generations to come. I think that's very, very important too, because we want to make sure our students or our young people understand how important it is to care for our environment, particularly our oceans and waterways. Not just today, we might have water coming out of the faucet today, but we need to protect these resources over the long term and keep them safe so we can continue using them. So I want to go back here. Sorry, I had to switch around the slides a little bit just because I had them out of order. But now I want to talk a little bit about exploring the seas. Like we said, the United States is surrounded by oceans on each side, the Pacific Ocean on the west and the Atlantic on the east. For some of us who are currently situated in South America, on the western side, the Pacific Ocean plays a huge role in our daily lives. Within the United States, there is an organization or an entity called the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency, or NOAA, which is kind of a fun play on words. And the responsibility of NOAA is to protect, preserve, manage, and enhance the resources found in the 3.5 million square miles of coastal and deep ocean waters of the United States. NOAA has a National Ocean Service that provides information and products to promote safe navigation and support coastal communities, among other things, and also help mitigate hazards or help when problems arise in coastal regions. So one really cool program that they have, and what I'm showing you here in this slide, is a program called the Okeanos Explorer. The picture here is of the Okeanos Explorer itself. This is a vessel that was commissioned in August of 2008 as America's ship for ocean exploration. It's the only U.S. ship whose sole assignment is to systematically explore the ocean for the purposes of discovery and the advancement of knowledge. So if you look at this ship, if you can just look at this photo here, I think you can tell that this is a pretty cool, this is no ordinary boat. It's pretty cool. And it has lots of tools on it. These tools are for information gathering. And some of the tools that they have here include underwater sonar to produce high-resolution maps of the seafloor. They have underwater robots or remotely operated vehicles that can go exploring when the scientists on the boat see something interesting and they want to look at it closer. They can send out one of these vehicles to take a closer look. And it also has very advanced satellite communications and telepresence, which is really cool. This means with all these communications tools that the vessel can actually send back live images to scientists who are onshore in specific laboratories or areas, and they can interact in real time. So this information that they're collecting on this expedition or research can be shared with scientists on land in real time, and they can analyze it and have a dialogue together and explore different things and have conversations about it. It can also, because it's able to send images or information right away, live. It can be shown in classrooms and in the world directly over the internet. So it's really, really cool. And I've put some links at the end of the PowerPoint so that you can see those things and check it out. They've got a lot of resources on there. I first learned about the Okeanos back in 2010 because I lived in Indonesia at that time. And the Okeanos was there on a joint mission between the United States and Indonesia to explore in the Coral Triangle, which is one of the most amazing parts of our world's oceans, the most biologically diverse area there, but it's also under a lot of risk. So they were there to study it, and it was really cool to have the U.S. and Indonesian scientists working together on this program. So now we're going to switch gears. I told you we're going to go really, really fast over a lot of fun topics today, and we want to have time to talk about activities too. So I'm going to keep talking as fast as I can. So our next frontier that we're going to talk about is outer space. And this has always been a favorite topic of mine since I was a little kid. I've always been fascinated by outer space. So I wanted to share some of the story of America's space exploration. And in a minute, I'll explain why we're choosing to share it this month, in the month of June. So many of you have probably heard of NASA already. NASA is the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, which was created in 1958 in the United States by our Congress and the President. And the creation of this organization was really directly related to national defense at that time, because basically after the Second World War, the United States and the Soviet Union, the two superpowers at that time, were locked in a battle, the Cold War battle, this contest of ideology and allegiance and the fight of one-upmanship was going on. And space exploration emerged as one of the topics or one of the elements of this competition. Both of the superpowers, both the United States and the Soviet Union, wanted to win the space race. So less than a year after the Soviet Union launched Sputnik satellite, the US launched their first satellite. And at that time, NASA had a number of facilities around the country, but today there are 10 such facilities. During its first decades, NASA was working on a lot of different programs, but some of them included human space flight initiatives. They also had robotic missions and aeronautics research, and they also created a reusable spacecraft for traveling to and from Earth's orbit. So that's a picture there of the shuttle. So just to go back, again, it was my fault I put the slides out of order there, but I have a picture there of President John F. Kennedy. Many of you have heard about John F. Kennedy. Well, John F. Kennedy had a really important role in the space race because in May of 1961, President Kennedy announced before Congress the dramatic goal, very ambitious goal, of sending an American safely to the moon by the end of the decade. This was a pretty big assertion to make at that time that he made it. At that time, there was no guarantee that we would actually be able to successfully put a man on the moon. But there were a number of political factors that affected President Kennedy's decision and the timing of it. He felt incredible pressure to have the United States catch up or overtake the Soviet Union in the space race. Because about 4 years after Sputnik, the Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin became the first human became the first human in space, and that was in 1961, which was a great embarrassment to the United States. So while Alan Shepard was the U.S. astronaut that was most closely following, he went to space the following month, but he just had a short flight. He didn't actually orbit the Earth like Gagarin had did, the Soviet cosmonaut. So there was a lot of pressure on President Kennedy that time, especially there were other things going on like the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis at that time. So he wanted to announce a program that had a strong chance, that the United States had a strong chance of achieving, or a goal that we could achieve before the Soviet Union. So I like to think that on some levels, the spirit of exploration that characterizes the American experience, or an American as part of our American identity, did have something to do with it. But in reality, the Cold War was really what was putting the pressure on President Kennedy during that time. And so he consulted with the Vice President Johnson, who you can see in that photo, the head of NASA, and other officials there, and decided that the goal that they were going to announce was the goal of landing a man on the moon. And this was a huge decision and a huge expense that they were going to invest to make what became the Project Apollo program, to make that a reality by 1969. So NASA's overall human spaceflight efforts were guided by Kennedy's speech. Their projects Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo were all designed to execute this goal. And the goal, in fact, was achieved, as you can see in that photo there of the U.S. astronaut. It was achieved on July 20, 1969, when Commander Neil Armstrong stepped off the lunar module ladder and landed on the moon's surface. There's a photo from that first moon landing. I also put this picture back up of the shuttle, because the shuttle program, which came a little bit later, the actual program to have a reusable spacecraft for traveling in and out of Earth's orbit came a little bit later, was developed later, and it was went into effect for about 30 years, from 1981 to 2011. So the shuttle program has actually been terminated. A lot of people think that means that NASA isn't working, but I'm here to tell you that that couldn't be farther from the truth. So the question there was, why are we including space in our webinar this month? Well, it's not just because Star Trek says space, the final frontier, or whatever it is they say on the Star Trek show. It's actually because, in addition to celebrating World Oceans Day and National Oceans Month in June, we had the opportunity to welcome a really special program. This month we had 3 Peruvian American engineers that you can see in this photo here. We had them come to Peru, and they all currently work with NASA on different projects around the United States. And the reason we brought them specifically to Peru was so that they could talk to young people about their careers and their trajectories in the field of engineering and in the field of science, particularly to talk to young women about the excitement that they feel about their job, about the motivation and the exciting things that they get to do. So they traveled to Cusco and Puno in Peru, and you can see there in Cusco right there. And they also visited Lima. And in Lima, they were part of a huge technology fair where we set up a stand that showed some artifacts from NASA, including a spacesuit and a model of a shuttle and all these kind of things. It was really, really cool. And everyone was excited to meet them. Even the First Lady of Peru wanted to meet them, and members of Peru's Congress. So it was really exciting. And I'm going to tell you about each of them individually very quickly before we move on to activities. And I'm hoping that these images that I share with you, or the stories that I tell a little bit about, we could spend a lot more time talking about that, and they did a great job sharing their stories with students across Peru. But the idea is just to show your students the story of some individuals that are working in science careers and are really excited about it. It's also a great way to talk about how specifically 2 of these students, Melissa on the far right, grew up in the United States, but both Rosa and Araceli had to learn English. So part of their professional trajectories, or their careers, including learning the English language skills that they needed to advance their studies and to become part of the NASA community. So let me tell you about them really quickly. Araceli is a certified flight operator at the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter Project at the Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. In this project, there you can see a model of what the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter looks like. This project is conducting a survey of the entire surface of the moon. It's helping scientists understand where the best places to land on the moon might be, and where it might be possible for human beings to stay longer if and when we return to the moon. So every 1 hour and 20 minutes, the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter sends back to Earth special communications that Araceli and her colleagues have to analyze. Araceli, who you can see up there in the corner right talking to students, also did some academic research that was particularly important to Peru. She studied map imagery of Andean glaciers taken from outer space. And based on these calculations, she was able to estimate how long the Cuelca ice cap, which is located south of Cusco, she was able to estimate how long this ice cap will exist. So as you know, glaciers are really important in the Andes as important sources of water for communities. So it's really important, this data that we're only able to collect and understand from outer space. We can see how this is important information that we can use here down on Earth to protect our environments. The whole structure of the Earth, of our home planet, is very complex. And so sometimes we have to get really high above, like from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, to understand what is happening. This next set of pictures is from Melissa Soriano, who works at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. The Mars Curiosity program that she works on is a robotic mission that was sent to explore Mars. And Melissa was actually part of the landing team that brought the rover to Mars in August of 2012. So can you imagine actually being able to land your robot on the surface of Mars and watch that happen? It's really, really incredible. Melissa is in charge of communications. And as part of this project, she and her colleagues work with something that's called the Deep Space Network. It's a communication network of satellites that collect, or a series of antennas that collect messages from all the different robotic missions around the solar system, because there is a number of different robotic missions. And there are 3 locations in the world: California, Spain, and Australia. So as the Earth rotates, these centers can be in constant contact with the robotic missions. So you might be asking, what does the Mars Curiosity do? Well, in very simple terms, it is exploring our neighbor. It's exploring this planet neighbor that we have. It's looking for the possibility of life and sources of water where life might have existed. It's also taking samples of the surface. There's a laboratory as part of this robot, this Curiosity rover. So the samples are actually collected by the rover itself and analyzed right there. There's no people in the laboratories there, but there are the technological mechanisms to analyze samples of the surface. And I included here in the upper right corner, you can see a picture that's kind of a funny shaped device there. That's actually part of the Sky Crane facility or mechanism that they use to land the rover. But I think it would be really fun to show your students that just that picture, and there's lots of pictures on NASA website that you can use to look at and tell them it has something to do with Mars. What do they think it is? You know, it would be really interesting to hear what your students think that might be, or to use their imagination, because they created an ingenious mechanism to land this rover onto the surface of Mars. So it's pretty exciting. And there's Melissa. She's actually talking with a young student in Puno when she was visiting there last week. And finally, the last slide I have here is a picture of Rosa Avalos. It's coming up there, hopefully. But there's Rosa. And Rosa is an engineer that works at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And she works on all sorts of programs related to the International Space Station. And if you can believe it, Rosa is only 24 years old right now. So on the space station, there are currently astronauts from different countries, including the United States, that are living in the International Space Station right now, conducting research, doing experiments, and observing the Earth from high above. Rosa's job is to prepare the vehicles, the transporters that travel to the space station. She also teaches astronauts about how to make repairs to the space station when they're up there. And it's really incredible. The space station itself is actually bigger than a soccer field, bigger than the soccer field at the Estadio Nacional, or if you think about your biggest stadium in your country. And right now, the only transporter that goes back and forth is the Russian-made Soyuz transporter. And I just wanted to mention that because it's really interesting that back when a lot of this space travel started, it was based on competition between the Soviet Union and the United States. Well, nowadays there's a community, an international community, and Russian scientists and American scientists and scientists from all over the world work together to address these issues. In fact, in 2015, they're actually getting ready at the International Space Station because in 2015, they are going to send a Russian astronaut and an American astronaut up to spend an entire year living at the International Space Station. So these are just some stories. I hope they're inspiring to you. They were really inspiring. You can also look at the Embassy's Facebook page for more pictures and more information about their visits because they were really, really fun, and I think it's a great way to inspire our students. So I'm going to invite Ryan now to come join me, and we are going to move to our next phase in our webinar, which is to talk about bringing all this great information into the classroom. So I'm going to share this. Maybe Ryan and I are going to, I'm going to turn it over to him, but we're going to do a little bit of this together. Hi, Ryan.
Hi. Well, Melissa, this has been a pleasure, and as always, you provide such a wealth of information and make all of those great connections. So I will return back to this webinar after viewing this, just so I can kind of see the pictures and share them with my students. So yes, activities, and this part of the webinar is always kind of one of my favorite things to do with the students, and we have done some activities on space and oceans that we would like to share with you today. Before we start, what we have typically done is created kind of a scripted plan for you to follow as you are putting together a lesson plan for your students. Number one is what are your topics? So of course, if you're going to be talking about space or oceans, you want to keep on that topic. What kind of questions or conversation starters will you ask? We're going to take a look at some of those today. What new vocabulary do you need? Melissa's provided an extensive vocabulary list following this. And what activities can you do with your students? We really like project-based activities where students can be really invested in their activities. And yeah. So Melissa has put together some of the vocabulary that would be maybe important when we're talking about frontiers and space and water exploration. You can see some of these words listed here. Do you want to talk about?
Sure. We'll try to get so we can both get on the screen there. See if we can both be visible. Or how's that? Yeah, these are just some of the words. I think if you want, maybe some of you can chime in and share with us some other ideas. I know there's words that I missed there. I wanted to ask if anyone can recognize one of the words here that's actually not an English word. We have stuck in a non-English word, sort of to trick you, but since we're telling you, we don't think it's much of a trick. But if anyone wants to go through that, these are just some different ideas. Can anyone pick out which word is not an English word? Give you a minute there. Maybe we can go back. Maybe we can go forward to the discussion questions. What do you think? And then come
Absolutely.
back.
Mm-hmm.
So take a look at that. Is there time? Well, maybe they need more time to give you a quick look. So, well, some of the discussion questions, and then we can just go to stay on this slide so that you can look at the list. Some of the discussion questions that we were talking about were asking your students to imagine themselves in the 1800s or in the frontier. Like, I could ask Ryan, would you, if you had to be, if you were going to be a settler, what do you think would be the most interesting part of being a pioneer or a settler, and what do you think would be the most difficult part?
Well, I think certainly probably the most difficult part is just the labor that you would have to put forth in order to accomplish your goals. I mean, we're talking about milking a cow in order to get your milk. I mean,
planting a field, maybe a very, like a desert kind of field, because in some of the areas out west of the United States, it's not great farmland. Maybe it was a difficult thing for people to try and do that. Anybody have any ideas about this vocabulary word? I don't see anyone responding to that. Should we go forward? What do you think, Ryan?
We shall. What was the word, though?
The word is ethos.
And what language is that?
Well, that's actually a Greek word.
Greek.
A Greek word. And the reason that we put it in there is because a lot of times in language, you have words that you borrow from different countries. It's definitely true in Spanish. It is true in English, just like that. But ethos is a really interesting word because in this case, we were talking about the ethos of the American explorer. I think that there's something about the identity of an American who wants to explore new things or go off in a new direction. A lot of times, if you want to give someone a compliment when they retire, or when you're describing someone who has done amazing things in their career, one of the things that they're described as a pioneer in their field. Like that idea of being an explorer or going into new places is kind of the highest honor that you could have, to be described as someone who has really been a pioneer. So should we move forward? So there's some more of the discussion questions, and we don't really need to go through those. You can just think of your own or read through theirs, but the last one there is about ethos specifically. And
I just think to point out, when you're beginning a lesson, I think to begin a class with these kinds of questions really helps to, it helps to open up the conversation and kids get really motivated. So consider really focusing in on some of these discussion questions when you're putting together your lesson plan.
Absolutely. All right. So let's get to our activities. We've got two for you, one about World Oceans Day and another about NASA and space.
All right, so I talked to you a little bit about World Oceans Day. Melissa had covered a little bit about this international holiday, which is on June 8th, and it's a promise to keep our waters clean. For this particular activity, we discussed this, with students the importance of oceans and water sources to different communities. So, just throwing out the first discussion question to a beginner group of students, why is water important to you? And you get a lot of interesting comments even from the beginner students. After that, we had students make a promise and something that they could do to help protect the Earth's water or environment. And it should be something realistic, should be something that they can promise to do for at least 1 year. Because as you know, it is World Oceans Day. However, we want to keep it a World Oceans of a lifetime. Keep the oceans clean. So by having students create a promise, such as shutting the water off when they're brushing their teeth, they're really making a commitment to conserving the environment. After this is done, World Oceans Day and their website has said, show the world. So we took a photo of students with their message and posted on social media with the hashtag World Oceans Day. And even though that this holiday has passed, I'm certain that the website would appreciate all contributions. So here's a couple examples.
That's great. No, I was just going to say it's really a cool way to get your students to think about their actions and how they have responsibility to it. And when they're making the promise or making a statement in public, they really take it more seriously because they're actually saying to their friends or sharing that idea, and they can get different ideas from each other about ways to conserve energy or protect the environment that maybe they wouldn't have thought of. So it's really cool.
And I think, adding them to social media, kids are so interested in that. So it's a great way to kind of share the work that you're doing with your students. So here are some examples from some Access students in Tarapoto, Peru. And let's just see if that will load. There's a few pictures coming up. What do you think?
It'll load. Oh, there are our students. You can see them with their promises. That's awesome.
Sure. So, and it was really great to do this. You can kind of see that they kind of acted out. So it makes it even more, a little bit more real. You can see that One of the students on the left bottom corner said he's going to shut off the sink when he's washing his hands. Another one said at the bottom right said he will not throw plastics into the ocean, and we had covered that before. So I think it's just a really great way to showcase what your kids want to say in English to the world about conservation efforts.
Cool. Very cool. We have a lot of interesting pictures today, so sometimes it takes a while to load. But there we are for activity number 2, which is our NASA Space Station Challenge.
Woo! It's space adventure. So, what we do is we pose this question. So, this is the International Space Station.
Yeah,
also,
this is where the project that Rosa works on. So this is a great activity from NASA. And they have lots of different activities too, so our teachers can explore their website because there's a lot of fun stuff.
And I think this is actually from the NASA website,
yeah.
And I just thought it was a really cool, interesting, an interesting topic that could really spur a lot of debate. Mm-hmm. So, and it says, imagine you are packing for a 3-month stay on the International Space Station. However. You can only take 5 items with you, and you must be able to carry all 5 items since storage is in short supply on the ISS. So I'd like you to, Melissa, I was thinking about the 5 things that I would take. Have you been kind of thinking?
Of course, I was thinking. I'm not a very light packer, so this is going to be difficult.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Marcella out there. Only 5.
Only 5.
So, Melissa, I was thinking. 5? I was thinking maybe a GPS mapping system for space would be kind of cool.
Okay. I'm thinking maybe a computer if we have technology that we can be back in touch with the scientists on the ground.
Well, what if we got hurt, Melissa? Don't you think maybe we would need a first aid kit?
That would be good. That would be good. I don't think there are many hospitals out in outer space, so that would probably be good.
Mm-hmm. I think it could get potentially a little bit smelly up there without a little soap, maybe some shampoo.
Yeah, that would be good. I can't live without soap.
Yeah. So why don't you chime in here, those of you out in webinar land, let us know what are some things that you would bring up into space.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody have any ideas about what they would need if they were going for a 3-month stay? Let's just assume that all our food is being taken care of by the International Space Station. You don't have to bring any snacks. You can have astronaut food.
I think I might also bring a picture of my family. I think.
Yeah, you're a long way from home in outer space. I would want a picture of my family too.
Oh, there's someone who would bring some books.
Oh yeah, good idea.
Juliana says medicines.
Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking about that, but medicines.
Yeah, especially if you need a medicine. Otherwise,
in case.
Just in case.
Yeah.
That'd be good. Marcella would bring her pillow, so she'd be comfy. Okay, that's good. We got a good list there.
All right, so this is one activity that you can go through with your students. I think it brings up a lot of really interesting brainstorming possibilities. Mm-hmm. Oh, a journal. I like that.
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh. But what's going to happen now? That's our list. Oh, you forgot to mention the alien phrase book.
Oh, yeah. I would totally bring a How to Speak Alien phrase book. Because you never know.
Language is important.
Beep, 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 beep.
Ryan might already speak alien. I don't know.
Well, I do teach teenagers.
Probably. Carmen said she would bring food, too. Obviously, you've got to eat if you're going to be there for 3 months.
So, here is the bigger challenge. So once you kind of had students brainstorm by themselves.
After they're comfortable and they're proud of their list.
Yeah,
you know?
They're 5. Marcella, 5. Mm-hmm. Oh, we have music.
An iPod, yes.
That would be a winner.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if this will load. So once the slide loads, what it say is, now there's a crisis.
Uh-oh.
Crisis.
It's a crisis on the space station.
Oh no!
With planning.
So the problem is there's not enough space for everything to fit. So you, along with a partner, your space cadet
buddy. Yes.
buddy, can bring 3 items.
Only 3.
That would be 3, Marcella.
Not 5.
Not 5. 3. So you could only bring 3 items. So Melissa, now we have to negotiate here.
Yeah.
So what do you think? I don't think you need a computer, because where are you going to get Wi-Fi?
Well, maybe there'll be a computer on the ship, on the space station.
Really? Huh. Well,
I think we still need medicine or a first aid kit, because if we don't have that, if we can't be safe, how are we going to get back?
absolutely. What about that picture of family? I think that was on our list, yeah?
Yes. So, I don't know, maybe we can get our families together and take one picture, and then it would only count as one.
It would only come as one.
That's an option.
What about a toothbrush?
Well, I'm not going to share a toothbrush with Ryan, so I think we're going to have 2 toothbrushes.
2 toothbrushes. So what you're saying now, Melissa, is we have 2 toothbrushes and one picture with both of our families.
Okay.
What happened about the first aid kit?
I don't know. This is going to take some time to discuss. I think people are going to have to determine what their priorities are.
Maybe what we could do, we could connect 2 different toothbrushes with some tape, and that would count as one.
Or we could create a toothbrush that has 2 different brushes on one end, like an engineer would do.
Beautiful.
And it's just one item.
I think you're. That's a new frontier, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, we are having a little bit of technical issues here, so let's see if we can fast forward just a bit. Okay, so here's the list, and so once you get pairs paired up, you can kind of have them begin to sort out what are the 3 top priorities. And I think it's a really fun, like you can
the
see,
negotiation part.
and just between Melissa and I think we were having fun just kind of fighting back and forth for like what you would bring.
Exactly.
So, and I think what would be even a bigger challenge is you could put 2 people with another 2 people and make a group of 4 and see. So it's all negotiating. And we'll see if we can get to the next slide.
The next slide was we were talking about just all the different skills that you use to talk about this subject.
Yeah.
All kinds of different things going on.
So you noticed that you were doing reading when you were reading out the problem and figuring out what you needed to do. You were writing down when you were making your list with a justification of why you would bring that particular item. Speaking, of course, goes hand in hand with listening. You have to listen to your partner in order to respond. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also important, there's some other critical skills that are needed in this, and that would be negotiating, justifying, explaining, perhaps exaggerating a bit, and these are higher order thinking skills.
Absolutely.
So when you are doing this activity, consider these kind of skills. It's an integrated skills activity.
Absolutely. Carmen was just pointing that out, integrated skills. Well, we have almost no time. Talk about a crisis here. We have almost no time to go over the rest of it, so I'm just going to quickly go through these last slides so that you can see what you can find if you check on the Relo website and on the links that our colleagues will share from the embassy here. Laura or Alfredo will share them. But there is a ton of links here. You've got American English and the Relo Andes page where you can find this presentation, and we hope you use it and show it in your classroom, and hopefully some of the slides are useful to you. But I also put different links from NOAA, the Oceanic Explorer, all of that, the Smithsonian, which is a network of museums in the United States. They have an ocean portal specifically for educators, and then great links from NASA. NASA has tons of images and wonderful stuff online. So, I wish we had more time for questions. You can always send them, check in on the blog or send them to the Relo Andes Facebook page or all of that. And we hope that you enjoyed this experience or this webinar talking about exploring frontiers and American culture. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.